Alright, so today we're going to be doing the majority element question for LeetCode 169. So this question in particular is you are given an array of nums, size of n, and you want to just return the majority, right? So for example 1, you have inside the array, you have 3, 2, and 3. You want to return the majority element, which in this case, or not the majority element, but just like the majority key, right, which is 3. So you just want to return 3. For example 2, you have 2, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, right? 2 appears more time than 1, so you're going to just return 2. So how you need to think about this question is, okay, right now it's saying the whole premise of this question is relating to how often something appears in an array, right? Or not even just an array in particular, it's how often does something appear. When you run into a question similar to this topic, it's kind of a giveaway that it's going to be using hash maps, which we went over in a ton of questions. But if you don't know, hash maps are a data structure which are in brackets too, similar to array, that keep track of how many times a certain element happens. So for instance, if we're looking at example 1, right, and example 1 is 323, then the hash map, once we're all done, creating it and so on, is going to look like this. So you can kind of see like, okay, so our key is 3, right? And our value is 2. The 2 happens because 3 has happened 2 times, right? And the same thing, right, for this little section. Our key is 2 because that's the number, and our value is 1 because it happens once, right? So now as we have an idea of what the hash map is going to look like and how it works, how do we create one? So we're given a list, right? So we need to increment through that list. So in order to increment, we create a for loop, right, for x and nums. So now we're iterating through each value in a list, and we want to, before we do anything inside, is create the hash map, right? So to create a hash map, it's just as simple as this, right? Hash map, it can be anything you can name it, and then you put these curly brackets here. Now we have a hash map, right? It's completely empty though. We need to add values to it, and that's why we have the for loop, because we're going to increment through the nums, right? Check each number and add it to the hash map. In order to do that, you basically are going to be using this little snippet of code 99% of the time, which is if x is in hash map, right? If x is in hash map, then hash map at index x plus equals 1. So this if statement is saying, okay, is x in the hash map? Well, it's not. So else, right? Else hash map at x equals 1. So this segment is saying, okay, go through each single number, right? And let's say we start at 3. We're going to check the first if statement. If x is in hash map, well, hash map is empty, so we're going to go to the else statement. Else, just make 3 equal to 1, right? So hash map at index x, which in this instance is 3, equals 1, right? And then next time we run into this 3, right, instead of saying if x in hash map, right, and just going to the else statement, 3 is already in there now, right? So you would do hash map at index x, which is 3, right, plus or equals 1. So this would have turned from a 1 to a 2, which is why we have this little segment right here, right? So this for loop creates this, right? Now we need to get the majority element. And now we know, okay, well, we have a hash map, and the majority element is definitely 3 because 2's here, right? So if we have the numbers of how many times it repeats, we're going to need to grab these numbers and start comparing, right? You kind of already have a visualization in your head, like, okay, well, like, let's see, is 2 greater than 1? Yeah, so then return 3. But how do we grab all those values? What we do is we can just loop through the for loop. However, you may be asking yourself, how do we do that if there's a key and a value, right? It's not just x where it's just there's one number. There are multiple. How we do that is by doing this, right? So key and a hash map dot items, right? So what this does is now we have two variables in the for loop. So in this one, this normal for loop, you're just given x, right? X represents 3, 2, 3 in this example, right? This for loop, we get the key and the value. This is the key, this is the value. This is the key, this is the value. And the way that how we get access to all this is by doing, instead of just in hash map like this, we do in hash map dot items. And this function dot items is what allows us to kind of grab every single value. So now we're able to basically grab the key and value in each single section of the hash map. This gives us more wiggle room to actually create that statement that we want to do, right? So what we need to do is create an if statement, right? If the value, oh, what happened? There you go. If the value, which the value is going to represent this number, right? I even write it here so we can remember this is the key, and then the value, right? Key and value. Key value. Okay. So we have the value, and it's greater than what? We're going to make a placeholder variable, right? And the reason why we're doing this is because this number is going to change, right? So if value is greater than majority, then we're going to set majority equal to that value, and we're going to set answer equal to key, right? So what this whole section of code is saying is if the value that we're on, which in this instance would be 2, is 2 greater than majority. Majority is 0 right now, right? So of course it is. So majority is set equal to the value that we're on. So now majority equals 2, right? This gets updated to be 2. And answer is going to equal key. Key is the variable we have in the for loop, and key represents 3, right? 3 being the most repeated number. So then we're not done because the for loop has to iterate through the entirety of the hash map. So now we're on this little segment, right? So now our key is 2 and our value is 1. And is value greater than majority? Well, the value for this is 1. Is 1 greater than majority? Majority is set to 2 from the last iteration. This is not true, right? So because this if statement isn't met, then we should just skip it. But look, now there's nothing else left in the hash map. So what do we do once we finish looping through the hash map? Well, all we need to do is just return answer because we've already saved our actual answer, the most repeated value, within this variable. So we just do return. We do it outside the for loop because once it's outside, it will run once the for loop is done. And let's give it a run to see if everything is in order. Perfect. Let's give it a submit to see if all the test cases are met. Beautiful. Okay. So, to take away from this question, this you don't need to, but in the way I showed it, we're using a hash map, right? Hash map is also known as a dictionary. That's another term that people call it. You're given a key and a value pair. This question is broken down into 2 steps. The first step being creating the hash map and running a for loop to add the values within it. And the second step is to loop through the hash map, all right, and to create a sort of like a dummy variable in order to update it constantly and to compare your value with the dummy variable. And once you get to a high enough number, you save your key and your value, and you continue updating it only if you find a number higher. And once the for loop is done, then you just return the answer.